Welcome back, aviation enthusiasts and fellow aircraft builders. Today's video is another tooling update. This is sort of a follow-up to my first tooling update video where I detailed the problems with how I was fixing my bending brake and using different riveting fixtures and such. So this here is very nearly the finished product of my C-frame riveting tool. The only thing I need to do is tack weld this washer in place so that the spring holds the ram up off of the rivet dies. But you can see down here I've got a hand rivet squeezer set machined into this aluminum bar stock, bolted securely to the channel underneath. And again, this is just some 6-inch channel, some 2x3 tubing that's 1/4-inch wall thickness, and some 4x6 tubing that's 1/4-inch wall thickness. And you don't have to build anything that robust, but for setting the solid rivets on the aircraft, it's been my experience thus far that this is by far the best way to do it without spending a terrible amount of money. I've gone ahead and rebuilt my bending brake with the solid rivets, and it appears to be working quite well. You can see those are the actual solid rivet heads. Now these aren't perfect because of the spacing. They were too close to the edge here for me to get the ram in perfectly, so these didn't set quite as nicely as they will on the airframe itself. Due to spacing problems. But when I actually go to do these on, say, my cabin sides, for example, which are right here, ready to be riveted, after I shoot them with some zinc chromate, this machine will work very, very well to do that with very few problems. I spent probably an entire day trying to repair the bending brake, because once you get the hinge attached to one side of it and you start attaching the second side, it's extremely heavy and hard to maneuver by yourself, which is what I was doing. So anyway, this C-frame press works out fantastically. I highly recommend that you use this method if you're going to do your solid riveting. In the kit, there's no solid riveting required because Zenith ships the wing spars and the cabin sides already riveted together for you, and corrosion protection already applied. But as plans builders, of course, we're doing it all ourselves. Previous tooling update video, I mentioned about my bending brake, and that after I repaired it, I was going to go ahead and try to bend this firewall channel and see if I could get it bent fully. And I did get it bent fully. Once again, had the table lifted up halfway off the ground on this edge to do it, but it held. The solid rivets held fantastically. However, and I don't know if you can see it in the video or not, but the hinge itself, you can see the little light gaps in there and that little kind of bulge out area. That's where the rivets are. Right on this end, to the right side of the bending brake, just right on this end, about 12-16 inches worth, it really buckled that metal out. The hinge itself, as the material started pulling and stretching, and it's still okay. I can still use it to do the rest of the project, provided that I don't bend anything that's 63 thousandths and about 3 feet wide. So I just really did not like the 63 thousandths, and I'm at the point now where I don't really want to take it apart and rebuild it yet again. I mean, I have the welder, so now I could build a much nicer brake, but I'm 3/4 of the way through parts fabrication on this project, and I don't really feel like taking a couple of days, drilling out all those solid rivets, putting in regular standoff hinges, and, you know, re-welding the whole thing so that I can bend up, you know, anything that I want on it at this point. I got a friend who has a full service machine shop. I have access to his bending brakes, and he's got some heavy duty brakes that will bend everything that I have left to do that I can't do here. So it's a judgment call. But if I had to do it all over again, as I mentioned in my top 10 scratch building concepts video, I would have bought the welder, learned how to weld by welding up fixtures and tooling, and I would have built a much more robust brake. If you're going to bend every single part in this airplane, not only do you need an 8.5 foot or a 9 foot brake to do it, but it needs to be much more heavy duty than what you have now, and you're still, even after that, going to have to figure out how to bend certain complex parts that would normally require a press brake that can't be done in a brake this way. So hopefully more on updates there. The firewall channel, upper firewall channel, turned out quite well. I had to manually actually tap some of that into position. You can see there's a little curve there. This is around a 1/4-inch radius, so it doesn't bend quite as sharply and quite as nicely as the 1/8 inch stuff does on the smaller and thinner material, but it turned out okay. I got a little bit of hand seaming to bend it just a little bit farther. I'll probably have to do that with a mallet, but overall this part turned out very rigid, very strong, and I just have a little bit of final cutting and shaping to do on it, and it'll be good to go. But there's 4 or 5 more pieces in the plane made out of this that are actually longer yet than this piece, and there's just no way I'm going to be able to do it on this bending brake. So another quick note, in a previous video, in my 10 scratch building concepts video, I mentioned briefly something about Harbor Freight tools. I wanted to touch on that in this video as well. I've used a lot of their tools, and I'm going to get to the bandsaw in the background in a second, but I, on a whim, just kind of went out and bought one of their pneumatic riveting tools. This is a 3/16 inch air hydraulic riveter, item number 93458. I've put a universal swivel with a regulator on it, and I buy these on Amazon. I think they were $12 or $15 a piece for the regulator, but the rivet gun itself was around $30 or $40. I did use this machine, or this tool, to do all the rivets in my rudder, and it works fantastically. There's just no reason to go out and buy a $400 riveting gun to do the pulled rivets, which is what this airplane is primarily constructed out of. As you can see, I've started working on my flapper-on skeletons here. I'm actually in the process of shooting a video about that as well, because I've noticed some things that I thought might be helpful when you're building your flapper-ons from plans. But I wanted to touch on this drill in particular. This is a pneumatic drill. It's the Nova Series 3200 RPM from Pan American Tool Corporation. This thing is awesome. Zenith recommends that if you're going to just spend the money on one tool, the most important tool to spend your money on is the air drill, and I highly concur, but I didn't want to drop $300 or $400 on the Sioux air drill that they advertised. That's the 3600 RPM model. I picked up this drill for $109.95. It was regular price from Pan American Tool Corporation. Because you're using standard twist bits to drill through this aluminum sheet, it has a tendency to make a sort of triangular shaped hole at lower speeds. But with these higher speed drills, drilling through sheet metal is a cakewalk, and it makes a nice perfect round hole. So if you have an air compressor and you're not using a cordless drill, I highly recommend picking up one of these. This is the Nova brand, and it works very, very well. I would argue probably just as well. So keep that in mind. That's a cheaper alternative to the Sioux drill if you're not, excited about the idea of spending $300 or $400 on a pneumatic drill. Another Harbor Freight item that I picked up a couple days ago is this little manual air compressor air hose reel. It's not the automatic retracting one. It is a hand crank model, but I can tell you it was well worth the few hours and 30 or 40 bucks I have into materials to put this thing up. This just completely decluttered a good portion of the shop from the air hose. I also added 50 more feet of air hose, and so now I can reach anywhere in the garage with my hose without any problem. Before I had to move the compressor around and plug it into different locations and everything. Now my compressor stays right where it is. It's got a secondary or a primary feed line here on a swivel up to the reel, and then I've got 75 feet now on the reel, so I can reach anywhere, including all the way out to the end of my driveway without moving anything, and it is fantastic. About 40 bucks in materials on this with my Harbor Freight purchase, and it works great. So the other major tool I wanted to talk about was the Harbor Freight bandsaw. This is the 4x6 metal cutting bandsaw. I originally had just purchased a Porter cable chop saw to do my metal cutting, but it works fine for just simple chop offs, but this thing actually allows for a little bit more detailed style cuts. As you can see, I'm still in the process of setting it up and getting it tuned up and making it so it cuts squarely and everything else. There are a couple of very good videos on YouTube about how to do that and really squeeze maximum performance out of this saw. I picked this up with a 20% off coupon when it was on sale, so I think I got it for around $200, $204. You can actually get them more cheaply than that. They run better sales on this from time to time, but I just didn't care to wait. So with my 20% off coupon, it was around $204 plus tax. So that's a major thing here. If I had to do it all over again, I would not get the Porter cable saw. I would get this saw. Moving on very quickly here, here's my welding cart project. It's still not finished yet. I need to cap off the handles here and finish permanently mounting the wheels and setting the wheel axle, or the wheels to the wheel axle, very quickly. It's made out of 1-inch square tubing for the frame, some round tubing for the handle here, and then I just did some stitch welding on the 14 gauge, or I think it's 11 or 14 gauge plate that I picked up was a drop at Alro Steel, and was able to weld up 3 shelves for it. My plan is that either if I don't store the porta cable saw down there, ultimately, then I can put like a plasma cutter down there someday. This actually turned out very well. I'm going to weld up some specific brackets to hold the gas bottle here, but you can see I've got it ratchet strapped down. Holds it very well, and there's space for 2 bottles side by side, at least in this 150 cubic feet size. So plenty of space. It's extremely stable. It turned out quite square, considering it was my first major welding project in 20 years. So very happy with it. Just need to make a few adjustments to it. And my welding is starting to come along. It's still not perfect, but I'm starting to be able to get that stack of dimes look with TIG welds and getting good weld penetration and not using too much filler rod. And that's turning out quite well. I will post an update of my flapper-on assembly video hopefully fairly soon, in the next week or two. I'm going to spend this weekend actually drilling out the lightning holes and flanging the lightning holes on the tail section spars and a few other parts. So I'm actually not doing the flapper-ons just right away. But hopefully I'll have a good update for you here pretty soon on assembly on these substructures. And that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Good luck with your projects.